I never expected my grandmother's death to spark a war, but looking back, I should have seen it coming. The letter arrived 3 days after we buried her, its crisp white envelope carrying her familiar, elegant handwriting. My name, Callum, written in the careful loops and swirls I'd watched her perfect over countless Sunday afternoons in her garden. My name is Cal, and until last week, I was just the family disappointment, the hawthorn who chose dirt and plants over our prestigious restaurant legacy. Now I'm the unexpected heir to my grandmother's estate, and my entire family has lost their minds. I stood in Grandma Mabel's garden, her letter trembling in my hands as the evening sun cast long shadows across her prized rose bushes. The same roses she'd taught me to tend when I was just a kid with scraped knees and too many questions. You can't be serious. My brother Jackson's voice crackled through my phone's speaker. The house? The whole property? What about the restaurant? The letter's pretty clear, I said, scanning the words again. She left everything to me, Jax. The house, the garden, even her savings. This is bullshit, Cal, and you know it. His voice had that edge to it, the one that always preceded an explosion. Dad's already talking to lawyers. You need to do the right thing here. I watched a monarch butterfly land on one of Mabel's white roses. The right thing according to who? Dad. You. According to the family. That property could save the restaurant. We're struggling, Cal. You know this. The butterfly took flight, and I followed its path until it disappeared over the garden wall. Maybe if you and Dad hadn't sunk all that money into that ridiculous expansion. Don't. Jackson cut me off. Don't you dare criticize what you abandoned. Some of us actually stuck around to carry on the family legacy. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Funny how the only legacy that matters is the one you chose. Cal. A new voice joined the conversation, Bianca, Jackson's fiancée. Be reasonable. Your grandmother wouldn't have wanted to cause all this drama. She loved the restaurant too. Did she? I walked over to the greenhouse where Mabel and I had spent countless hours. Because according to this letter, she wanted me to have everything specifically to prevent it from being sold off to save the restaurant. The silence on the other end was deafening. Listen, Bianca's voice turned honey-sweet. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? We can discuss this as a family. Your mother's making your favorite pasta. I touched the greenhouse door, remembering how Mabel would always say, trust the garden, Cal. It never lies. Unlike people who could wrap manipulation in the guise of family dinner. Thanks, but I have plans. I didn't, but they didn't need to know that. I need to start sorting through Grandma's things. Cal. Jackson started, but I ended the call. Inside the greenhouse, everything was exactly as Mabel had left it. Her gardening gloves still draped over her favorite wooden chair, her tools arranged with military precision on the workbench. I unfolded her letter again, reading the last paragraph that had set this whole mess in motion. My dearest Cal, I know this decision won't be popular, but you're the only one who truly understands what I've built here. This garden isn't just plants and soil. It's a testament to choosing your own path, even when others can't understand it. Don't let them destroy it. And Cal, check behind the loose brick in the greenhouse's north wall. There's something else you need to see. I looked up at the north wall, where generations of ivy had made their home. Somewhere behind those leaves was another piece of Mabel's puzzle, and something told me it would only add fuel to this family fire. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother this time. Your father is very disappointed. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I turned off my phone and started examining the wall. Whatever Mabel had hidden, I needed to find it before anyone else did. Because one thing was becoming crystal clear. This inheritance wasn't just about a house and garden. It was about to expose every crack in our family's carefully maintained facade. The doorbell chimed just as I was prying at the loose brick in the greenhouse. Of course they wouldn't wait for an invitation. Through the glass walls, I could see my parents' silhouettes approaching, my mother's pearls catching the late afternoon light. I quickly smoothed my dirt-covered hands on my jeans and met them at the garden path. My father's disapproving gaze swept over my casual attire, while my mother clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Callum, my father said, using my full name, never a good sign. We need to discuss this situation like adults. I was just working in the greenhouse, I said, gesturing to my clothes. Let me clean up and... Playing in the dirt again? My mother's smile was tight. Some things never change. We settled in Mabel's kitchen, where the ghost of countless Sunday dinners hung in the air. My mother immediately began straightening things, rearranging the fruit bowl as if its slightly askew position personally offended her. The restaurant's in trouble, Cal. my father began, his voice carrying that familiar weight of expectation. Real trouble. Your brother's been working himself to death trying to keep it afloat. I heard about the expansion problems, I said, keeping my voice neutral. The new location isn't performing well? Don't pretend you care now, my father snapped. You walked away from all that responsibility years ago. Left it all on Jackson's shoulders. My mother touched his arm. Everett, please. We're here to talk solutions. She turned to me, her expression softening in that calculated way I knew too well. Sweetheart, this house. It's just too much for one person. And the maintenance costs alone. I can manage, I said firmly. Grandma Mabel taught me everything about maintaining the property. Ah yes, all those hours wasted in that garden when you should have been learning the business, my father muttered. A memory surfaced, 16-year-old me, proudly showing my father the herb garden I'd planted for the restaurant's kitchen. His dismissive wave as he walked away, saying real men don't play in the dirt. I pushed the memory aside. The property's value could save everything, my mother pressed on. The restaurant, our family's legacy. What about Grandma's legacy? I challenged. This garden was her life's work. It's a hobby, Callum. The restaurant is our family's foundation. My phone buzzed, a text from Tessa. Don't let them bulldoze you. Remember what Mabel always said about standing your ground. I'm not selling, I said, standing up. Grandma left this place to me for a reason. My father's face darkened. You ungrateful. Everett, my mother interrupted, her voice honey-sweet again. Cal, darling, at least look at the offer we've prepared. It's very generous. She pulled out an envelope from her bag, sliding it across the kitchen table. I didn't touch it. This isn't about money, I said. This is about respecting Grandma's wishes. Respect? My father's laugh was harsh. Where was your respect when you abandoned your family obligations? When you left your brother to shoulder everything alone? I didn't abandon anything, I shot back. I chose a different path. Grandma understood that. Your grandmother. My mother hesitated, exchanging a look with my father. She wasn't thinking clearly near the end. Perhaps if we contest the will. Get out. The words came out quiet but firm. Excuse me. My father's face reddened. I said get out. Both of you. And take your offer with you. My mother's face crumpled in that practiced way that used to make me cave instantly. Cal, please. Now. They left, my father's angry muttering mixing with my mother's theatrical sniffles. As their car pulled away, I noticed something had fallen from my mother's bag. A small notebook I recognized as Grandma Mabel's garden journal. Flipping it open, I found recent entries I'd never seen before, including one dated just weeks before her death. The words made my blood run cold. They're planning something. Must protect Cal. Must hide the truth about. The rest of the page was torn out. I looked back toward the greenhouse where the loose brick waited. Whatever Mabel had hidden, I needed to find it fast. Because now I knew, this wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. There was something else, something my family desperately wanted to keep buried. I was still trying to make sense of Mabel's torn journal entry when Tessa called. You need to get down to the county clerk's office. Now. What? Why? Because your brother and his fiancée just walked in with a stack of papers, and I overheard them talking about property transfers. Tessa worked as a legal secretary there. Something's not right, Cal. 20 minutes later, I was speed walking through the courthouse's marble halls, my muddy boots leaving tracks on the polished floor. I rounded the corner just in time to see Bianca at the clerk's window, sliding documents across the counter with perfectly manicured hands. I need to see those papers, I said, stepping up beside her. Bianca's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. Cal, what a surprise. Family business, you know how it is. Exactly. Which is why I need to see what you're filing. The clerk, an older woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, looked between us uncertainly. Sir, those documents concern my grandmother's property, I said firmly. I'm the legal owner. Actually, Jackson's voice came from behind me. That's what we're here to correct. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but his jaw was set with determination. The will was never properly executed. We have proof. Proof? I laughed. What proof? Grandma Mabel wasn't competent when she made those changes, Bianca said smoothly. We have medical documentation. The clerk frowned. I'll need to verify. Here. Bianca produced another document with a flourish. Signed by her doctor. I snatched the paper before anyone could stop me. The signature at the bottom made my stomach drop, Dr. James Rivers. Bianca's father. This is fraud, I said, my voice shaking. Your father never treated Grandma. He consulted on her case, Bianca replied. And as a respected neurologist, his opinion carries weight. Mabel was sharp as a tack until the day she died. I snapped. Everyone knew that. Did they? Jackson stepped closer. Or did you just see what you wanted to see? Face it, Cal. She wasn't thinking clearly when she cut everyone else out. She didn't cut anyone out. She made a choice. A choice you manipulated her into making, Bianca said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. All those hours in the garden, playing the devoted grandson while the rest of the family actually worked. Don't you dare. What's going on here? A new voice cut through the tension. Martin Chun, the family's longtime lawyer, stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand. Martin, Jackson started, we were just filing fraudulent documents, it appears. Martin stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. I was Mabel's attorney for 30 years. I supervised the execution of her will, which was witnessed by 2 independent parties. She was completely competent. Bianca's smile finally cracked. This isn't your concern. Actually, it is. Martin turned to the clerk. Please note that any attempts to transfer this property without proper authority could constitute legal fraud. I'll be filing an injunction immediately. The clerk quickly gathered the papers, stamping them with a large red suspended mark. Jackson grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. You're destroying this family. I looked at his hand, then into his eyes. No, Jax. You're doing that all on your own. Back in Mabel's garden, I finally found the loose brick and the envelope hidden behind it. Inside was a USB drive and another note. The truth about the restaurant's finances. Keep this safe. They'll try anything to hide what really happened to the money. My phone buzzed, a text from Bianca. This isn't over. You have no idea what you're up against. I looked at the USB drive in my hand, then at the garden where Mabel had taught me that growth sometimes requires cutting away the dead parts to save the whole. She'd known this was coming. She'd prepared for it. Game on, I whispered, pocketing the drive. Because now I understood. This wasn't just about saving her garden anymore. This was about exposing whatever rot had taken root in my family's foundation, no matter the cost. I started toward the house, already planning my next move. Behind me, storm clouds gathered over the garden, promising rain. Perfect weather for unearthing buried secrets. The email from Evergreen Landscapes arrived while I was reviewing the files on Mabel's USB drive. A job offer. Not just any job, but the kind that could define a career. Lead designer for their West Coast division, complete with a 6-figure salary and creative control over major projects. The catch? I'd have to move to Seattle. Leave the garden. Leave everything. I was still staring at the screen when Tessa showed up with coffee and a determined look in her eyes. You're brooding, she said, setting a cup beside me. I can smell it from the driveway. Look at this. I turned the laptop toward her, then gestured at the scattered financial documents surrounding it. And all this. The restaurant's been hemorrhaging money for years. But not because of bad business. Tessa leaned in, scanning the numbers. Someone's been cooking the books? More like feeding them steroids. The expansion money? Most of it disappeared into offshore accounts. I rubbed my eyes. Jackson's signature is all over these transfers, but the patterns. They're too sophisticated for him. Bianca, Tessa said quietly. She worked in corporate finance before getting engaged to Jackson. My phone buzzed, another text from Martin Chin. Meeting tomorrow. Bring the evidence. And Cal, watch your back. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the window, I spotted a sleek black car I didn't recognize. Mr. Hawthorne? A woman in a crisp suit stood at the door, flanked by 2 men carrying briefcases. I'm Rebecca Walsh, representing Evergreen Landscapes. We were in the area and thought we'd discuss our offer in person. My stomach dropped. No one just happens to be in the area with a full legal team. This isn't a good time. Actually, she stepped forward, it's the perfect time. Especially given your current family situation. The way she said it made my skin crawl. In the kitchen, Tessa was quickly gathering the scattered documents. How did you know about that? Rebecca smiled. We do our homework, Mr. Hawthorne. We also know about the attempted property transfer today. You're fighting a losing battle here. We're offering you an exit strategy. The garden can be maintained by professionals. We'll even include it in your contract. But you need to decide quickly. She checked her watch. Before things get messy, eh? What does that mean? It means your brother's fiancé has friends in high places. The kind who can make fraud allegations stick, regardless of truth. The kind who can ensure you never work in this industry again. My hands clenched. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you protection. And an opportunity. She placed her card on the counter. You have 24 hours. Choose wisely. After they left, Tessa found me in the greenhouse, aggressively pruning Mabel's roses. Cal, stop. You're butchering them. I looked down at the mangled stems. They knew about the property transfer attempt. Hours after it happened. How? Because this was never just about the garden. Tessa picked up one of the fallen roses. Think about it. The restaurant's money laundering, Bianca's connections, this sudden job offer. They're trying to get you out of the way. But why? What's so important about this property? Tessa's eyes widened as she looked past me. Cal, the zoning maps in Mabel's files. Did you check them? I hadn't. We rushed back to the laptop, pulling up the documents. There it was, a proposed rezoning plan for the entire neighborhood, with Mabel's property at its center. Prime location for a massive commercial development. This is what they're after, I whispered. The garden's just collateral damage. My phone buzzed again, Jackson. Take the job offer, Cal. Please. While you still can. For the first time, I heard real fear in my brother's message. Whatever was happening, he was in deep. Maybe too deep. The rose in Tessa's hand had left a trail of petals on the floor. Red drops like blood, marking a path I had to choose. Run toward safety or stay and fight, knowing it might cost me everything. Mabel's voice echoed in my memory. Sometimes the hardest growth comes from standing your ground. I picked up Rebecca's card and slowly tore it in half. Call Martin, I told Tessa. Tell him to bring everything he has tomorrow. It's time to prune the family tree. Martin Chen's office felt too small for the weight of what we were discussing. The financial records from Mabel's USB drive were spread across his desk like a paper trail of betrayal, each document adding another layer to the conspiracy. They're planning to demolish the entire historic district, Martin said, adjusting his glasses. Your grandmother's property is the keystone. Without it, their development plans fall apart. And the restaurant? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A front. They've been laundering money through it for years. Your brother's signature is on everything, but, Martin hesitated. But what? The patterns match other cases I've seen. Cases involving the Rivers family's development company. My phone buzzed, a text from Jackson. Need to talk. Alone. Please. I showed Martin the message. He shook his head. Don't go. It's too risky. But I was already standing. He's still my brother. The restaurant was closed when I arrived, but the lights were on. Through the window, I could see Jackson sitting at the bar, looking older than his 34 years. You shouldn't have come, he said as I walked in. But I'm glad you did. Start talking. He poured 2 whiskeys, sliding one toward me. I never wanted any of this. The restaurant, the expansion, the development deals, it was all Dad and Bianca. I just wanted to make them proud. He laughed bitterly. To survive. You got out, Cal. You had the courage to walk away. I got trapped. So tell the truth. Help me stop them. I can't. His hands shook as he reached for his glass. Bianca's father. He doesn't just destroy businesses, Cal. He destroys lives. The front door chimed. Bianca walked in, followed by my father and 2 men I didn't recognize. Well, isn't this touching? Bianca's smile was sharp. The prodigal brothers reunited at last. You set me up, I said to Jackson. He couldn't meet my eyes. Nothing personal, one of the men said, moving to block the exit. Just business. My father stepped forward. Sign the papers, Cal. Transfer the property. We can all walk away from this. Walk away. I laughed. Like you walked away from Grandma Mabel when she refused to sell? Is that why she died so suddenly? The room went silent. Jackson's face drained of color. Careful, little brother, Bianca warned. Some accusations can't be taken back. Like money laundering? Or fraud? I pulled out my phone, showing them the screen. Everything you just said is being recorded. And live-streamed to Tessa. The bigger man started forward, but Bianca held up her hand. You're bluffing. Check your phones, I said. It should be hitting social media right about now. They all reached for their phones. In the chaos, I edged toward the door. You idiot, my father snarled. You'll destroy everything. No, I said. You did that yourself. I'm just pruning away the rot. I made it outside just as police sirens started wailing in the distance. Tessa was waiting in her car around the corner, engine running. Did you get it? I asked as I jumped in. She held up her phone, grinning. Every word. The police and FBI are on their way. Martin's meeting us at the station. As we drove away, I watched the restaurant shrink in the rearview mirror. The place that had imprisoned my brother and corrupted my family, now about to become a crime scene. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from an unknown number. Your grandmother would be proud. But this isn't over. I stared at the message, wondering if it was from Martin or someone else. Because despite everything we'd just exposed, something told me we'd only scratched the surface of what Mabel had discovered. "You okay?" Tessa asked. I thought about Jackson's haunted eyes, my father's rage, and Bianca's cold smile. About the garden waiting at home, where tomorrow I'd plant new seeds in soil enriched by everything that had died before. "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." The sirens grew louder behind us, their wail mixing with the night air like justice finally breaking free of its chains. Sometimes I realized revenge doesn't taste like victory. Sometimes it tastes like survival. The wedding invitation arrived exactly 1 month after my father's arrest. Cream-colored paper with gold embossing, like nothing was wrong. Like our family hadn't just imploded in a scandal that made headlines across 3 states. "You're not actually going," Tessa said, watching me turn the invitation over in my hands. We were sitting in Mabel's kitchen, where the morning light still couldn't chase away the shadows of recent events. "Jackson posted bail for Dad," I said. "Used everything he had left." That's not an answer. I traced the embossed letters. Despite everything, the fraud charges, the ongoing investigation, the revelations about Mabel's death, Jackson and Bianca were moving forward with their wedding. At the restaurant, of all places, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "He's your father, Cal. Whatever you think he did, he doesn't deserve this." Another message followed. "Jackson needs his brother there. Please don't make this harder." I laughed bitterly. Make this harder? They tried to frame me for fraud, threaten me with thugs, and possibly. I couldn't finish the sentence about Mabel. The investigation was still ongoing, but the evidence pointed to her death being far from natural. "Which is exactly why you shouldn't go," Tessa insisted. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Martin Chen's car in the driveway. "It's not good," he said as soon as I let him in. "The Rivers family is pushing back hard. Their lawyers are trying to discredit the evidence, claiming it was obtained illegally. But the live stream? They're saying it was edited, manipulated." Martin looked exhausted. "And Jackson? He's changed his statement. Says you set them up, that you're the one who orchestrated everything." The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Through the window, I could see Mabel's garden, where the roses she'd loved so much were beginning to wilt. "Why would he do that?" "Because I had to." Jackson's voice came from the doorway. None of us had heard him come in. He looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. "They have Mom, Cal." "What?" "She's resting at Bianca's family estate. They're calling it a nervous breakdown, but..." He swallowed hard. I had to change my statement. I had to protect her. The pieces clicked into place. The wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a show of force. A message that the Rivers family was still in control. "The invitation," I said slowly. "It's a trap, isn't it?" Jackson wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just come to the wedding, Cal. Please. Make a speech, wish us well, show everyone that the family drama was overblown. Maybe then what? They'll let Mom go. They'll forget about destroying everything Mabel built. They'll let us live," Jackson whispered. After he left, I stood in the garden, surrounded by dying roses. Everything Mabel had created, everything she'd fought to protect, was slipping away. And now I had to choose between justice for her death and my mother's safety. "There might be another way," Martin said, joining me outside. "But it's risky, and you'd have to trust me completely." I looked at the wilting garden, remembering Mabel's words about growth requiring sacrifice. About how sometimes you had to cut away what you love to save what matters most. "Whatever it takes," I said. My phone buzzed one final time, a message from Bianca. "Looking forward to having the whole family together again. Don't forget to wear black. It's a formal affair after all." The threat wasn't even subtle anymore. Wear black like we're all attending a funeral. Maybe we were. I picked up a dead rose, its petals crumbling in my hand. "Tell me the plan, Martin, and then help me find a suit. Because sometimes, to save what you love, you have to walk straight into the dragon's lair. Even if you know you might not walk back out." Tessa touched my arm. "Cal." "I know," I said, watching the rose petals scatter in the wind. "But Mabel taught me that every garden needs pruning sometimes, even if it means cutting all the way down to the roots." The restaurant gleamed like a funeral parlor, all black ties and forced smiles. I adjusted my dark suit, the same one I'd worn to Mabel's funeral, and walked into the lion's den. Bianca had transformed the place, replacing its warm family atmosphere with cold elegance. Black roses everywhere, their thorns prominently displayed. A message just for me. "Cal." My mother's voice trembled as she approached, flanked by two of Bianca's cousins, men with hard eyes and concealed weapons. "You came." Her hands shook as she reached for me, and I saw the faint bruising around her wrist. My blood boiled, but I kept my face neutral. Martin's plan required patience. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Where's the happy couple?" "Making an entrance, of course." Mayor Davidson appeared beside me, champagne in hand. "Though I must say, I'm more interested in your work, Cal. That community garden project of yours has everyone talking." Bianca materialized before I could respond, resplendent in white. "Mayor Davidson, I'm so glad you could make it. Though perhaps we should discuss the development proposal, rather than gardening." "Actually," the mayor said, "I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Seems there are some irregularities in the paperwork." A commotion near the entrance cut him off. Jackson burst in, his face ashen. "The FBI. There!" The doors flew open. Agents poured in, led by Martin Chun, not just a lawyer, but a federal investigator who'd been building this case for years. "Nobody move." Martin's voice boomed. "We have warrants for multiple arrests." Bianca's smile turned razor-sharp. "This is a private event. Whatever you think you have." "We have everything," I said quietly. "The real estate fraud, the money laundering, the offshore accounts. And Mabel's autopsy results." Her composure cracked. "You're bluffing." "The garden soil, Bianca. Did you know Mabel tested it regularly? Kept records of every chemical change." I stepped closer. "Including the poison that showed up 3 days before she died." One of Bianca's cousins reached inside his jacket. 3 agents immediately drew weapons. "It's over," Martin announced. "Bianca Rivers, Everett Hawthorne, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and first-degree murder." My father, who'd been silent until now, lunged for me. "You ungrateful." Jackson caught him, surprising everyone. "Stop, Dad. Just stop." The mayor watched in shock as agents led Bianca away. "My God, I had no idea. That's why they wanted the garden gone," I said. "It held the evidence. Mabel knew what they were doing, so they killed her. But she'd already prepared her revenge." "The inheritance," Jackson whispered. "She left it to you because I was the only one who would understand the garden's secrets." I touched one of the black roses. "She taught me that every plant tells a story if you know how to read it." As the chaos unfolded, my mother collapsed into my arms, finally free from her captors. "I'm so sorry, Cal. We should have listened." "Mrs. Hawthorne," Martin interrupted gently, "we'll need your statement about your detention at the Rivers estate." I watched them lead my father away in handcuffs, saw Bianca's mask of sophistication crumble as agents read her rights. The restaurant, the source of so much family strife, would likely be seized as evidence. Jackson stood alone by the altar, his world imploding. What happens now? Now! I looked at the black roses, thinking of Mabel's garden waiting at home. Now we start over. Plant something new. Together? He sounded like the brother I'd once known, before ambition and greed poisoned everything. "Maybe, if you're willing to get your hands dirty." The mayor cleared his throat. "Speaking of new growth, Cal, I'd love to discuss expanding your community garden project. The city could use more of your expertise." Outside, police lights painted the night in red and blue. Inside, among the wreckage of what was supposed to be a wedding, I felt Mabel's presence. She'd known it would end this way. Not with a celebration of love, but with justice finally blooming through the cracks of our broken family. I loosened my black tie. Tomorrow, I'd plant white roses in the garden. But tonight, there was one more truth to unearth. 1 year later, I stood in Mabel's garden, my garden now, watching Jackson struggle with a particularly stubborn root. His prison-pale skin was slowly gaining color under the summer sun. "You're doing it wrong," I said, kneeling beside him. "Here, like this." I demonstrated the proper angle, remembering Mabel teaching me the same lesson years ago. 3 months into his community service, and my brother was finally learning the difference between weeds and wildflowers. The judge had been surprisingly poetic in her sentencing. Help restore what his actions had helped destroy. "The mayor called again," Tessa said, appearing with 3 glasses of lemonade. "The community garden network is ready to expand to the next district." I nodded, watching a monarch butterfly land on one of Mabel's white roses, the ones I'd replanted after the wedding that never was. The restaurant was gone now, converted into the city's first urban farming education center. Sometimes karma has a green thumb. "Mom's therapy is going well," Jackson said quietly, accepting the lemonade. "She's talking about volunteering at the center, teaching kids about herbs and cooking." Our father's trial had broken something in her, but like the garden after winter, she was slowly coming back to life. Some plants need severe pruning to grow back stronger. Found something else too, Jackson added, pulling a weathered envelope from his pocket. Behind the old restaurant's wine cellar wall during demolition. It's from Mabel. My hands trembled as I opened it. The paper was old, but the words were clear. My dearest boys, if you're reading this, then everything has happened as I feared it might. But remember, even the hardest soil can nurture new growth if you're willing to work it together. There's more, Jackson said, his voice thick. Look at the date. The letter was written the day before she died. She'd known what was coming, had planted the seeds of justice even in her final hours. Cal. My mother's voice came from the garden path. She looked smaller now, humbler, but her eyes were clear. The Heritage Rose Society called. They want to register Mabel's white hybrid officially. Did they say what they'll name it? She smiled softly. They're calling it Mabel's Truth. I looked around at what we'd built from the ashes of our family's implosion. The garden had expanded, now feeding 3 local food banks. The education center was thriving. Even Bianca's father's development company had crumbled under federal investigation. You know what's weird? Jackson said, finally defeating the stubborn root. I always thought the restaurant was our legacy. But Mabel knew better. She saw what really needed to grow. A familiar voice seemed to whisper in the breeze. Trust the garden, Cal. It never lies. There's something else, Tessa said, holding up her tablet. Remember that mysterious text you got? Martin finally traced it. It wasn't from him. Then who? Margaret Rivers, Bianca's grandmother. Turns out she and Mabel were friends in college. She's been feeding information to the FBI for years, trying to stop her own family's corruption. I thought about karma again, about how the truth finds its way to the surface like a determined seedling pushing through concrete. The garden needs a new section, I decided. Something to mark everything that's happened. Any ideas? Jackson stood, brushing dirt from his knees. What about a maze? But instead of walls, we use flowering vines. Something that looks complicated from the outside, but actually leads to something simple. Like truth, our mother added softly. I picked up my gardening tools, Mabel's old ones that still fit my hands perfectly. Better get started then. These things take time to grow. As we worked together under the summer sun, I realized that revenge, like gardening, isn't about destruction. It's about clearing space for something better to grow. Mabel had taught me that, in her own way, through every seed we'd planted together. The butterfly took flight, rising above the garden where our family was slowly, steadily, putting down new roots. Different from the ones we'd had before, but stronger for having weathered the storm. Sometimes the best revenge is simply growing beyond what others thought possible.
I am Caroline. I'm 31 years old. I currently take care of our domestic chores while being at home. For the past 3 years, my spouse Jerry, 4 years my senior, and I have resided with his parents, Henry and Marilyn. Henry and Marilyn are both in their 60s and in good health. Jerry's mother Marilyn is quite outgoing and leads a busy social life. Despite not having a job outside the home, I have observed that Marilyn rarely helps out around the house since we moved in. She used to be a stay-at-home mother, but these days she mostly delegates household duties to me. Marilyn sometimes tells me to take time off, but when she comes back, she gets mad at me if things aren't perfect. I've made an effort to talk to her about this and let her know that I might not be able to finish everything before she departs, but she brushes off my worries. Frequently, she makes the comment that having a lot of duties to do is typical and berates my generation for not managing as effectively as hers did. Marilyn also constantly compliments Jerry, mentioning that she is proud of his work at a prestigious company in particular, and she also feels that even though Jerry puts in a lot of effort, I fall short. She now frequently comments on this comparison. Jerry's response is not helpful. When Marilyn bemoans my efforts during meals, all he does is answer with a detached, "Oh, really?" which conveys very little encouragement. When Jerry was younger, I respected him for his maturity. But these days, even when I work late into the night, I frequently feel like a housekeeper. The issue has gotten harder and harder, and I wish Jerry would defend me more. It seems like he doesn't realize how much I've contributed to our house. Instead of coming right up to me, he throws laundry at me, pointing at my face, and says curtly that I should take care of that too. Because of how much he has changed since our wedding, I regret getting married to him. He brought home a cake on our first anniversary, but he also laughed about it and playfully crushed a pie in my face. It's remarkable that he's an adult. But there is one bright spot in my life. Henry, my father-in-law. He always asks if I need help with anything and is quite peaceful. In this household, he is the only one who is friendly to me. Henry has grown to be a confidant since I quit my work to get married. He's become more and more special to me, and I now consider him to be a father figure. But Henry works throughout the day, so I find myself spending a lot of time by myself with Marilyn. I can talk to Henry as I like, but Marilyn becomes grumpy with me. Because Jerry ignores me, she even started accusing me of flirting with my father-in-law. She would toss these charges around while Henry was not around. I attempted to refute it, but she ignored me, sarcastically inquiring as to if she had offended anyone, always prepared with a scathing rejoinder. Our discussions appeared to get off topic at all. I brought these concerns up with Jerry, thinking he might realize they were nothing more than Marilyn's baseless fears. But he dismissed me with a joke about my newfound interest in older guys. It was glaringly obvious that nothing would shift. Not only did I not think he would start doing chores and stop making fun of Marilyn, but I also didn't think he would respond the way he did. I felt more and more uncomfortable in their house after such a big shock. Marilyn got talking one summer day about organizing a summer vacation trip for Jerry's family. Marilyn asked whether I wanted to go on a family trip, which surprised me because I had assumed it was just her usual enthusiasm for trips. I had assumed they might go without me. Therefore, I hadn't anticipated receiving an invitation. Marilyn saw me hesitate, or look doubtful, and asked whether I really wanted to go. Her unexpected invitation unsettled me. I was unsure of her motivation and concerned about her possible reaction if I said no. Jerry brought up the trip again that evening, asking if I was going to be attending. I was surprised by his response when I mentioned that I had been invited. He laughed heartily. I asked him why he thought it was hilarious, feeling even more uncomfortable and confused, but he waved my inquiry away, saying it was unimportant. Jerry was driving. Marilyn was sitting next to him, and I was in the back of the car on the day of the trip. Henry's professional duties kept him from joining us at first. My nervousness increased when I couldn't see their faces while we were driving. Marilyn asked me halfway through whether I had taken out any money for the vacation, and I said that I had, a total of a few hundred. Her happy expression struck me as odd. I realized we had driven past the inn where we were meant to stay as we carried on. Did we just pass the inn? I inquired. Jerry gave a hazy response, saying we would check in after viewing the tourist attraction ahead. I was filled with a sense of dread as his smile failed to reach his eyes. The longer we traveled, the more luscious and desolate the surroundings became. I sighed quietly, so that neither Marilyn nor Jerry would hear me worry. After a while we reached a tiny isolated dam with very few people there. Jerry reminded us not to leave anything precious in the car, and Marilyn advised us to come outside and stretch our legs. I did as they said and ventured out into the strange surroundings, still attempting to process the day's surprising turns of events. Jerry and Marilyn appeared to be hesitating as I got out of the car and closed the door, as though they were trying to adjust something inside. The sound of the locks engaging was then audible to me. With the windows barely cracked open, Jerry started giggling hysterically. Perplexed, I inquired, "What's happening? Do we intend to spend the night here?" A wave of rage for Marilyn passed, but I controlled myself. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying not to lose my temper. "You walked right into that one, didn't you?" Jerry replied, laughing so hard he had to clutch his stomach. My wallet and cell phone were still in the car. Everything had unfolded just as Marilyn and Jerry had planned. "Have fun out here, Caroline." Marilyn sneered mockingly. "Maybe you can eat some grass and sleep under the stars." Jerry, still holding my wallet, rifled through it and then rolled up the window. Their laughter faded as they drove off, leaving me stranded. Standing alone, feeling the heat, I muttered to myself, "Well, this is just great." Despite the sweltering heat and the risk of dehydration, I surprisingly didn't panic. About an hour later, I found myself in the lobby of the inn where we were originally supposed to stay. "Why are you here?" Jerry exclaimed, shocked to see me as he entered the lobby. "Are you a ghost? Did something happen at the dam?" He looked utterly bewildered. Marilyn, who looked like she was on the verge of fainting, eyed me nervously. I considered playing along and pretending to be a ghost just to tease them, but I decided against it. "I'm not a ghost, and I'm staying here tonight," I told them, showing them the key to my room where I had already dropped off my luggage. Jerry couldn't make sense of the situation and started to get agitated. He thought I had taken the key to their room without permission. "What are you doing? Give it back," he demanded, reaching for the key aggressively. However, I was prepared for their antics this time, and I stood my ground, ready to confront whatever came next. Just then, a man stepped forward and firmly grasped my husband's hand. "Sir, please refrain from causing a disturbance here," he said with authority. He was about the same age as Henry, but with a stronger build and taller stature, which made him appear more commanding than my middle-aged, slightly overweight husband. "Who are you? Are you staff here? You can't just interfere with a guest like this. I'll sue you for assault." Marilyn shouted at the man who intervened. "I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. I am the owner of this inn," the man replied calmly. Upon hearing this, my husband quickly released my hand. I recognized the owner. Back in my college days, I had visited this area with friends during a summer break. It was an extremely hot day, and we got lost on our way to our accommodation. During our ordeal, we stumbled upon a girl who collapsed on the side of the road, Kelly, the owner's daughter. We immediately called for an ambulance and stayed with her until help arrived. The next day, the owner visited us at the inn where we were staying and thanked us profusely. "You saved my daughter's life. Thank you so much," he had said. He also extended an invitation. "Next time you're in the area, please stay with us. You won't have to pay." Since then, my family and I have visited the inn several times, so I knew the owner quite well. As he addressed my husband and Marilyn, he remained polite, yet I could sense the undercurrent of anger in his demeanor. In fact, both the owner and I were aware of Marilyn and my husband's scheme from the beginning. 3 weeks ago, feeling suspicious about their sudden invitation for a trip, I decided to set up a voice recorder in the living room. I strategically placed it to capture conversations when my husband and Marilyn thought they were alone, like when I was taking a bath or doing laundry. When I stumbled upon their plan, it was utterly shocking. I heard my husband and Marilyn plotting over a recorded conversation. "Let's ditch Caroline somewhere. It would be hilarious. How about near that dam an hour's drive from the inn?" Realizing the gravity of their scheme, I immediately contacted the owner of the inn to inform him about what was unfolding. The owner was livid upon hearing this, having once experienced his daughter collapsing in the heat. He felt a personal connection to my predicament and was even more perturbed by their callousness. With the situation clear to him, he meticulously arranged my pickup for today, just after my husband and Marilyn's car had departed. Interestingly, the driver of the inn's shuttle turned out to be Kelly, the very girl we had helped years ago. "I got my license. Let's go for a drive," she exclaimed with excitement. Despite my initial surprise, I agreed, and we chatted happily, even stopping to buy some local specialty ice cream on the way back to the inn. Even though I knew about the plan and that a pickup was coming, I was still worried. But Kelly, knowing the area exceptionally well, expertly navigated, and we arrived at the inn significantly before my husband and Marilyn. "You mentioned suing earlier, ma'am," the inn owner said, addressing Marilyn with a stern look. "Yes, I did. It's outrageous to be accused of the opposite." Marilyn snapped back defiantly. "I'm sorry, but you're not our guest," the owner responded firmly. "What? Don't mess with us." My husband and Marilyn both lost their tempers simultaneously. "Your reservations have been canceled," the owner stated plainly. "And who do you think you are?" My husband blustered, on the verge of another outburst. The owner held him back. "Caroline did nothing wrong. We at the inn canceled your reservations," the owner explained calmly. "What do you mean?" my husband demanded. "If you leave a woman alone at a dam in the mountains after stealing her wallet, wouldn't you be committing a crime?" The owner posed rhetorically, emphasizing the gravity of their actions. "We cannot permit such behavior at our inn," he declared, and revealed that he had already called the police. My husband and Marilyn became even more incensed at this revelation. "This is no joke. You can't treat us this way. I work for a respected company," my husband protested, as if his job should afford him special treatment at this quaint mountain inn. Just then, Henry arrived, immediately sensing the tension. "Hey, what's going on here?" he asked, surveying the scene. Marilyn and my husband quickly tried to spin the story, accusing the inn staff of rudeness and claiming they wanted to stay elsewhere. However, when Henry was briefed on the actual events, he became enraged, a side of him I'd never seen before. "You idiots!" he yelled, clearly embarrassed. "I can't believe we're from the same family. You two, get out of here now." My husband and mother-in-law were stunned by Henry's outburst. "Where to? Another inn?" they asked, bewildered. But Henry was resolute. "You're disowned. Get out." "No, don't make me say it again," he commanded, pushing my husband away. As the police arrived, my husband and Marilyn's complexions turned ashen. The owner and I explained the entire scenario to the officer, and I played back the recorded conversation. My husband and Marilyn began to cry, but Henry interjected sharply. "Quiet down. You're disturbing the inn. Officer, please take them away." "It's not like that, officer. We didn't think it would be such a big deal. It was just a prank," my husband tried to explain, but the officer's expression hardened. "A prank? Are you serious? Don't you realize that your little joke could have put someone's life at risk, especially your own wife's?" They were scolded harshly, though they weren't arrested due to the familial nature of the matter. Marilyn and my husband looked pale throughout the ordeal. "This isn't over. Caroline's feelings will determine your future, understand." With those final words, they left, still visibly shaken. Henry, who seemed apologetic for not intervening sooner, stayed behind to ensure everything was settled. Henry repeatedly expressed his remorse. "I'm sorry. I can't apologize enough for not noticing the unpleasant experiences you've been having and the terrible ordeal you went through today." He also extended a deep apology to the inn owner for the trouble caused by his family's actions. Interestingly, it turned out that the inn owner, who also runs several other businesses, is a client of the company where Henry works. Unaware of this connection, my husband had earlier boasted about his position at a prominent company, adding another layer of embarrassment to the situation. I was relieved that I had uncovered my husband and Marilyn's plan in time, but it was also a sobering reminder of what might have happened if I hadn't been vigilant. I hoped that being reprimanded by the police would help them realize the gravity of their actions. I decided to file for divorce from my husband after we got back from the inn, and I asked for a sizable settlement, thinking that this would teach them not to injure anyone else. Unexpectedly, Henry and Marilyn also ended up getting divorced. After the incident, Henry broke off all contact with my ex-husband and threw him out of the house. In addition, my ex-husband received advice to quit his position. His actions at work had also been troubling for a while. He had been unkind to his engineers and co-workers in the same way that he had handled me, and the HR department was already considering taking legal action against him. As I thought back on what I had done, I was disappointed to see that I had somewhat emulated such bad behavior. My ex-husband was unemployed now and had difficulty finding work. Even at his advanced age, he had no experience in management at his prior employer, thus he had trouble justifying his move. Marilyn was also expelled by Henry and went to live with family before going back to her parents' house. These events signaled a dramatic change in the course of events, emphasizing the fallout from their deeds and the value of integrity in both personal and professional spheres. Marilyn's tendency towards spending and traveling continues to raise concerns. If she were to move in with them, her relatives fear she would spend all of their savings. Since her health is still sound, it might be wise for her to think about getting a part-time work so she can support herself and allay these worries. I currently live independently close to my in-laws after moving out of their home. Henry and I are friends, and sometimes I ask him for guidance on work-related matters. I'm starting a new chapter in my life by accepting new professional chances instead of continuing in my prior function as a caregiver for the family and manager of domestic Torah business owner who knew of my recent struggles contacted me during my employment search. He offered me a job at his company and showed care. He was ready to assist me in establishing a solid foundation within his company. Feeling touched by "Greetings, my maid." This is the first thing she says, even though she is aware that I am meeting with the intention of proposing marriage. I emitted a bewildered noise, supposing I must have misheard. "Oh, you're not the maid. You have such a poor-looking face," says Olivia, my future mother-in-law, giving me a sour smile. Scott, my fiancé who I believed to be on my side, horribly deceived me. He gave my face a quick glance before laughing heartily. "You're right, her face does not look good. I wish I could see her parents." Olivia continued, "Honestly, I wonder whether your parents would pass out from amazement at seeing a house as wealthy as ours." Olivia and Scott continued to belittle me and even teased my parents. When they weren't looking, I sent my father a message because I could take it no longer. He swiftly replied that he would be there immediately. I decided to get some fresh air because I could no longer take Scott's comments. Refrain from fleeing. As I walked out to wait for my father to arrive, I could hear Scott's crude laughter. I presented Scott and his mother to my father, Richard, 15 minutes later. Scott said, This is the father of the slave. His eyes were not smiling, but his speech was composed. Parent, hold on, Olivia said, recognizing my father and becoming pale in the process. I'm Kelly, a 31-year-old employee at a small business. I've made it my life's work to blend in. I like wearing blue or black clothing and normally wear just foundation because of this. Because of my height restriction, I wear thick glasses instead of contacts. My low-key demeanor stems from my father's prominent career, which has shaped me since I was a young child. As an actor, my father enjoyed considerable popularity in the past and was frequently encircled by women while strolling around the town. Despite typically playing minor parts, he is nevertheless rather well known and frequently appears on television. My father made middle school difficult. His parents wanted their children to meet him, and classmates would beg for his autograph. I was frequently chastised for turning down all of these requests. They must have thought I was harsh to them, and I even had to deal with jealous students bullying me. I detested the thought of bragging, and I didn't want to bother my loving father. I went to a high school where no one knew me and dressed casually while struggling with these feelings. Fortunately, my last name was common, so I could carry on with my life as usual. I was able to have a carefree student life because men avoided approaching me due to my unassuming appearance. My greatest memories are of spending time with my female friends, having comic book conversations. It was after I started working that I met Scott, my fiancé. Scott was employed by the business that rented the copier machines to my workplace. At first, I didn't say much to him. Every time Scott stopped by to see how the copy machine was doing, we would have a little conversation. When the copy machine broke one day, it drastically altered our relationship. The machine broke down while I was busy getting ready for a meeting the following day, and I became really anxious. I called Scott because I needed it in order to prepare the documents. He arrived swiftly and examined the device. Is there a way to fix it? Worried, I asked him. With a smile, he continued, I'll take care of it. Don't worry. That smile of Scott's made me fall in love. We were able to have the papers ready for the meeting, even though Scott had to arrange for a substitute because the copy machine could not be fixed. I tried to get closer to Scott after falling in love with him. I phoned him frequently after requesting his contact details. After that, I told Scott how I felt, and we began dating. Scott was consistently very thoughtful and helpful. He had never seemed angry to me. I assumed that even after finding out about my father, he would still be nice. I confidently proposed to Scott after we had been dating for 2 months, and he gladly accepted. I was ecstatic back then. One thing, though, concerned me: the way I looked. Even on dates, I had always worn big spectacles and dressed simply. It was a difficult habit to break. The actual me had clear features and resembled my father exactly. I had been rejected by boys for my attractiveness in middle school and had received invitations from other girls because of it. Even though it was difficult, I believed that Scott would understand. I wanted to gradually modify how I looked for the man I loved. Nevertheless, I began to feel uneasy after Scott proposed to me. Scott seemed nice before we were engaged, but lately, he started saying things that upset me. Scott proposed that we visit a bridal fair the other day to select our wedding location. He took me to this opulent location, a stunning guest house fit for an extravagant wedding with more than 200 guests. When I saw that, I was perplexed. I didn't want to stick out because I don't have many schoolmates. It was the little ceremony and small setting that I had hoped for. I didn't bring it up because Scott looked to be enjoying himself, and I didn't want to leave straight away. Scott was really happy when we went to a cafe after it was over. Wasn't the wedding location we saw earlier lovely? I want something even more lavish, he remarked, sipping his coffee. I chose to tell Scott what I wanted since I was nervous. I thought it would be wonderful to have a quiet wedding for just the two of us. I figured kind Scott would get that I don't like to stick out too much. But the real world was much different. Scott gave me a snide look and laughed. You wouldn't belong in a setting like that, you simple girl. Most likely, no outfit will look well on you with your heavy glasses. The comment made by Scott stunned me. I questioned, isn't a wedding about both families? He went at it. Not having a big wedding would be embarrassing because my family is wealthy. I was unable to speak. The once kind Scott seemed to be a different person, as though he was now gazing down on me. His attitude hurt me a great deal. Even worse, Scott said something that really confused me. You should just keep quiet and do as I say. A plain woman like you should be grateful to get married at all, he added, glancing at me gravely. I was astonished and even intimidated by his nasty statements. Scott then grinned and added, I'll make all the decisions, so all you have to do is follow my instructions, okay? I merely gave an uncomfortable smile because I had no idea how to reply. It was too late to act as though becoming engaged to Scott had never happened. I had already announced our engagement to my employer and our parents. I still adore Scott in spite of everything. I wished he would return to his previous kind self before we became engaged. Therefore, even though I was perplexed by Scott's adjustments, I felt compelled to carry on with the engagement. Scott continued to say things that bothered me, and every time he did, my heart grew more wounded. However, I was unable to harbor hatred for him. I was reminded of the nice Scott I used to know. Even in moments when I considered ending things, I persisted in the relationship despite my confusion because I still loved him. Then something happened one day that made me even more perplexed. That was the day Scott and I decided on the location of our wedding. Scott made his selection from the opulent guest house we first saw after seeing a few others. A lavish ceremony really suits me, he remarked, beaming. That's too bad for you, unfortunately. Scott's laughter stung me. To sign the documentation, we proceeded to the guest house. I noticed someone unexpected on the way. Oh, Scott, is that you? She was the one. With a startled expression, Scott questioned, Mom, why are you here? Then he gave us an introduction. Olivia, this is my mother, Kelly. This is my fiancée, Kelly, Mom. Remember how I told you I was getting married? Olivia greeted me with a smile and said, I'm Scott's mother. You seem like a serious woman. Where do you work? You must be working at a big company, right? This was my first time meeting Scott's mother. I nervously told her about my company and that I do clerical work. Olivia made a puzzled face and said, I've never heard of that company. Scott then joined our conversation and said, Kelly's company is one of my clients. It's a small company with about 20 employees, so it's natural you haven't heard of it. After hearing Scott's explanation, Olivia's face turned grim. I thought since you were Scott's fiancé, you'd be working at a more reputable company. Doesn't that mean your salary is low? Are you planning to make Scott suffer? Olivia's words caught me off guard. I felt embarrassed and quickly said, I'm sorry, my salary isn't very high at my current job. I had no choice but to apologize to Olivia. She sighed heavily and said, Can you at least not rely entirely on Scott? Our family is from a distinguished background. We don't need a woman with a questionable background. I didn't know how to respond to her harsh words. Olivia continued, What about your parents? They work at reputable companies, right? She glared at me with narrow eyes. My father is? I started to answer, but then I noticed something familiar in her bag and stopped talking. Seeing my confusion, Scott spoke up. Come on, Mom, calm down. We're going to visit the house and make our marriage introduction soon, all right? Olivia didn't look happy and glared at me with a sour expression. It was clear that my first impression on her was terrible. The path to marriage seemed difficult, and I sighed quietly. Then came the day of the marriage introduction. Wow, I muttered as I stood in front of Scott's family home. It was far beyond anything I had imagined. Olivia had mentioned that their family was distinguished, so I expected them to be wealthy, but the reality was astonishing. The gate was automatic, there was an elevator inside, and there were even 10 luxury cars parked outside. They must be my future father-in-law's hobbies, I thought. Scott then said to me, Dad is out for work today. It's just Mom, so make yourself comfortable. With a smile, I felt even more nervous. Olivia had been so harsh to me last time, and I feared she would make more sarcastic remarks. Scott and I entered the living room, where Olivia was waiting. Hello, thank you for the other day. I greeted her politely. The next moment, Olivia said something unbelievable. Welcome, my maid. Even though she knew I was here for a marriage introduction, this was the first thing she said. What? I let out a confused sound, thinking I must have heard wrong. Olivia looked at me with a mean smile and said, Oh, you weren't the maid. You've got such a poor-looking face. I couldn't believe she said something so awful. Then Olivia laughed, clearly enjoying herself, and said, Scott told me it's okay to treat you like a maid. Too bad for you. What do you mean? I asked, feeling pale and hoping it was a bad joke. I wanted to believe it wasn't true, but the fiancé I thought was on my side betrayed me in the worst way. Scott glanced at my face and burst out laughing. You're right. She does have a poor-looking face. I'd love to see her parents. Maybe we could use them as our servants too, he said, laughing crudely. Indeed, Olivia added. Having someone obedient for free is quite nice, but if they come to a rich house like ours, I wonder if Kelly's parents would faint from shock. Olivia and Scott kept looking down on me. Olivia asked with a laugh, By the way, what does your father do? He's not homeless, is he? Scott burst into laughter and replied, Mom, that's not a job. Given how Kelly is, he probably doesn't have a stable job. Ah, this is making my stomach hurt from laughing. Scott and Olivia continued to mock my parents, assuming my family was poorly educated and must have a plain appearance. I gritted my teeth in frustration, unable to bear their rude comments. They even looked down on my parents. I couldn't take it anymore and sent a message to my father while Olivia and Scott weren't looking. I need you to come now. I wrote and also sent him the address of Scott's family home, which Scott had sent me for today's marriage introduction. I remembered it was my father's day off, so he must be relaxing at home. Luckily, my father replied within a minute saying, I'm on my way. Feeling relieved, I told Scott and Olivia, I'm feeling a bit unwell, so I'm going to get some fresh air. I couldn't stand listening to Scott and his remarks any longer. I thought I would wait outside quietly until my father arrived. Oh, is that so? Well then, Scott, why don't we continue our tea leisurely? Olivia said, pleased to be alone with Scott. Kelly, don't you run away, Scott added, his crude laughter echoing as I left. I left my seat and waited outside for my father to arrive. 10 minutes later, he showed up wearing dark sunglasses. Kelly, what's wrong? Today was supposed to be your marriage introduction, right? He asked, looking puzzled. Seeing my father, I felt relieved and started to cry, even though I tried hard to hold back the tears. What's wrong, Kelly? My father asked, now worried. I explained everything to him. How Scott's attitude changed after we got engaged, and how Olivia joined in looking down on me. I can't forgive them for treating you like that, he said. My father listened quietly, but was clearly angry. I told him more about what Olivia had said, and my father laughed. He took off his sunglasses and handed them to me. We're going in now. I'll make sure they regret hurting you, he said firmly. With my father's support, I made up my mind. My love for Scott had faded, replaced by anger. We'll make Scott and his mom regret it, I thought as I put on my father's sunglasses. Together, we entered Scott's family home. I stood in front of Scott and Olivia with my father by my side. Sorry to keep you waiting, I said, standing tall. Olivia, who had initially laughed at me, became stunned when she saw the man beside me. I realized people freeze when they are too surprised. Olivia must have thought she could say something terrible again when I returned, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. I planned to make her pay for her behavior. Olivia already recognized who my father was. My father is the maid's father, I said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were stern. His handsome face made him look even more imposing. Olivia, who recognized my father, was shocked. How could this be? Why is Richard here? Is this some kind of joke? She asked, her cheeks turning red and her eyes sparkling like a young girl's. Scott stood there, clueless and stunned. My father didn't answer Olivia's questions, but kept staring at her and Scott. Olivia blushed under his gaze, which was quite embarrassing for a woman of her age. I looked at Olivia with a cold stare. Scott, now regaining his composure, asked in confusion, Richard? Mom, is he a friend of yours? Scott probably didn't know about my father. He's quite well known among Olivia's generation, but younger people might not recognize him unless they watch TV dramas. Olivia glared at Scott. Scott, how rude of you. This man is a famous actor and my first love. Scott looked shocked and confused. Then Olivia turned to my father, smiling and speaking to him. I'm a big fan of yours, Richard. See? Look at this, she said, pulling out her purse to show my father a keychain that only fan club members can buy. I've been a fan for over 22 years, she added, expressing her admiration. Mom. Scott seemed appalled by Olivia's sudden change in behavior. Olivia continued talking to my father, clearly thrilled to see her favorite actor. However, my father's gaze on Olivia was stern. After remaining silent, my father finally spoke up. I am aware that you are one of my fans. Did you, however, attempt to treat Kelly, my beloved daughter, like a maid? Olivia, who had been so animated, turned pale and froze at my father's comments. She began to shake. Dad ignored her and went on. And without even getting to know me, you assumed I was homeless. That's really impolite of you. Olivia became alarmed as my father gave her a stern look. No, I was unaware that you were Kelly's father. It's a pleasure to have you join the family, don't you think? Olivia cried out to Scott in desperation, looking to him for comfort. Yes, of course, Scott answered, obviously giving in to Olivia's pressure. Olivia attempted to defend herself to my father by stating, I would have behaved more politely if I had known. I apologize. My previous remarks were motivated by jealousy. I feared that I would lose my son. I was astounded by Olivia's words. Now that she understood who my father was, she was trying to shift the tone with which she had been seeing me and my father. "Kelly is a wonderful woman who resembles Richard," she exclaimed. Observing their exchange, I reasoned that I couldn't allow my father to experience any more distress. I should be the one to bring this up with Olivia. It is my problem. I then broke the news to her. "I'm divorcing Scott. You and my dad will never become family." "How come?" "Kelly, please think again. This is my opportunity to grow old with Richard," Olivia stated, becoming nearly emotional. Her weeping face was untrustworthy despite everything she had done to me. Olivia felt she could persuade me, even if I gave her a chilly look. She grinned as she saw my silence and remarked, "You want to marry Scott, don't you? I will no longer object to it. It's all right. I'll go above and above for you." Olivia had completely changed from her previous attitude. Now, she was willing to do anything and was yearning to become a member of my father's family. I was mocked by Olivia's abrupt reversal of opinion. I said, "No, thank you," quietly. "How come? How did you say that?" Olivia pretended not to hear me as she tipped her head. I yelled, "I absolutely do not want to become family with you," louder this time. Olivia looked surprised at my outburst. "You made crude remarks about my job and spoke terribly about my father," I addressed her. "That is something I will never be able to forgive." I made my position known. Olivia turned to face my father and grinned as she said, "Kelly says this, but Richard, you want your daughter to be happy, right?" Olivia realized she couldn't convince me. We have a prosperous family, so she will be content with us. I don't believe that wealth makes people happy. Other people do. My father told Olivia, "Kelly values love over money," knowing how I felt. In addition, our family is well off. As an actress, I make a respectable living. Olivia struggled to find words. It was expected. My father is a well-known actor who frequently stars in dramas and never has financial difficulties. Our family is wealthy, therefore there's no reason for me to get married for financial gain. Olivia went mute, unable to think of anything worth arguing. My father went on, "You say you're one of my fans, but I hate anyone who treats my beautiful daughter badly. Would you perhaps stop referring to yourself as a fan?" My father gave Olivia a frown when he said this. "I won't be able to live if Richard hates me," she exclaimed, breaking down in tears. Olivia broke down in tears. Scott, who'd remained quiet up until now, started talking. "Kelly, you've shown a lot of bravery. If you call it quits on our engagement, you'll regret it." He laughed. "Nobody will want someone like you." "Hold on a second." Concerned at my father's response, Olivia attempted to stop him, but Scott persisted. "I assumed you would be submissive, so I picked a simple woman like you. After we get married, I'm going to cheat on you with other attractive women." It seemed clear to me that I had made the right choice after hearing Scott discuss such topics. I slowly concluded that all Scott had desired was a woman who would submit to him. He had never loved me. My feelings for Scott had long since soured. As I was thinking this, Scott continued to talk about himself. My dad clenched his jaw, appearing as though he would seize Scott at any second. It felt like my time to strike back. "Dad, please wait." I halted my dad. I smiled, making sure my sunglasses stayed on. "What's going on?" My composed smile took Scott by surprise. "Is this still simple?" With a flourish, I removed the sunglasses and asked. Scott stared at my face with shock. I had cried when I saw my father and then put on makeup. I usually just wear foundation, but today, I was wearing mascara, eyeliner, and eyeshadow. My appearance had changed drastically with just a little eye makeup. "Kelly, is that really you?" Scott blushed a little bit. It appeared that my cosmetics had me spellbound. "Yes, that is me. I've always tried to hide my appearance in order to blend in, but I've made the decision to stop," I remarked. "Because of my father's reputation, I had up until now tried to blend in as much as possible, but after being made fun of by Scott and Olivia, I realized it was acceptable to stand out and be myself." "I would have been nice to you if you had been like this from the beginning," exclaimed Scott, blushing. "We have time to start fresh. Come on, let's re-engage and use your father to introduce me to some stunning actresses." Who would carry on the engagement at this point, particularly with the audacity to request actress introductions? I told Scott exactly where I stood. "The relationship is ended. I no longer require someone similar to you. I'll also call off the wedding location." "What?" Although Scott was in disbelief, I wasn't going to give up lightly. "Of course, you will be responsible for paying the wedding venue's cancellation charge." "That's only just," I went on. Olivia cried out, bewildered. "Wait a minute. It's too much to pay for in full." Scott appeared confused and unable to think of a reply. "Why not have Scott's father cover it?" My father then said. "It shouldn't be an issue with all those fancy automobiles, right?" With a revitalizing smile, my father said this. "I used my strongest suit. We can file a lawsuit if this doesn't satisfy you." Recall that my father is a well-known actor, and word of this could incite his ardent supporters to take revenge. My father has a large and devoted following. After making disparaging remarks about my father, detractors received horrific threats, including letters and prank calls with knives. It even made the headlines because it was that horrible. Olivia paled as she thought back to that experience. "Scott, you must cover all the cancellation fees," she hurriedly pleaded with him. "We have no idea what could occur." Olivia's worry made Scott realize, at last, how serious the situation was. "Are you serious?" Deflated, Scott went to his knees. "You are not necessary in my life," I continued, disregarding Scott and Olivia, who were looking sad. "Dad, let's head home." My father and I departed. Now that their engagement was terminated, Scott was required to cover the whole cost of the wedding venue's cancellation. It turns out that my father had once starred in a commercial for the company that Scott's father is the head of. My father told Scott's father what had transpired because of this link. Scott's father was incensed, not knowing what was going on. He angrily confronted Scott and Olivia, insisting that Scott pay for the entire cost of the postponed wedding. Scott was consequently left with a heavy financial load. Olivia was also impacted by the outcome. Her father, Scott, started the divorce process. Although how they treated us was a problem, it wasn't the main one. Olivia reportedly had a penchant of squandering money, as seen by the amount she spent on fan events for my dad. Scott's father, who had already run out of patience with her, provided the funds. In addition, my father disclosed that Olivia had written him improper love letters that included phrases like, "I want to divorce and marry you." My present husband, Richard, is nothing more than a cash cow. This infuriated Scott's dad. With the assistance of attorneys, the divorce was finalized against Olivia's objections. I'd heard whispers that Olivia was crying all the time and that this wasn't meant to happen. She had also been kicked from of my father's fan club due to her disruptive ways. Most likely, it was inevitable. Olivia lost everything. Therefore, I find it hard to believe that she might ever find happiness. She got what she deserved. Unexpectedly, Scott was taken into custody 8 months later. He was unable to forget me. That day, I removed my sunglasses, and Scott began to regularly appear in front of my house. He contacted me frequently, sobbing on the phone and pleading with me to call off our engagement, even after I quit my work. He would say, "I need you. No one else will do." All he cared about was how I looked. Scott sobbed and clutched his phone, but he was probably just curious about how I looked. My appearance before and after cosmetics had a noticeable difference. I don't need a man who is purely superficial. I gently declined and then put a stop to his calls. But Scott started acting more ferociously. I visited the police multiple times, and on occasion I even received threats of harm. My father supported my choice to submit a police report, which I did after giving it a lot of thought. Scott was ultimately taken into custody for attempting to break into our home. It appears that Scott lost his employment following his incarceration. All Scott will likely have left is a mountain of debt. He will likely no longer be able to support himself. It's the result of having such a low opinion of people. I've been managing my father's business ever since. Compared to my prior clerical employment, this position is significantly more hard. I meet guests, arrange my father's schedule, go with him to sites, and bargain over pay. I used to primarily work on the computer, talk to a small number of people at the office, and commute between the company and my house. Meeting and chatting with individuals has now become a major aspect of my work. Though it's a significant departure from the past, I really appreciate it. Although managing is a glamorous job, my role involves more than that. I help my father in the background so he can concentrate on his acting career. Because to the erratic work schedule, you must be flexible. Above all, it's a career that allows me to help my father out intimately. I wish to make up for all the anxiety I have brought upon him. I only recently started this job, so there will undoubtedly be many obstacles, but I want to keep going and give it my all in support of my dear father. I am going to keep doing my hardest today. "Come on, get the coffee already," she exclaimed, her voice full of eagerness. My sister-in-law smirked and remarked, "This is why people who drop out and are even good-looking are just terrible at their jobs as housekeepers." I was going to respond to her hurtful remarks when something unexpected occurred. Her fiancé was standing close by when I recognized him, and as soon as I looked up, there was an unexpected hug. I wasn't sure what was going on because it came as such a surprise, but that hug made all the difference. It seemed as though my sister-in-law and I had suddenly switched places. "Hello, my name is Lauren, and I'm 37 years old. Watching footage of my kids' dancing performances while nodding off is one of my favorite pastimes. My baby is the greatest, a true angel. It's the prettiest thing ever, the way their little limbs and pretty little butt move when they dance. I enjoy spoiling my child because parents always think their child is more precious than anyone else's. Upon more reflection, it's possible that this is also how my sister-in-law, Lily, was raised. Let's travel back a few years to a time when I had recently tied the knot. My husband Jack stated that he wanted us to live with his parents once we were married when he proposed. Though the idea made me uneasy, I consented. Many believe it doesn't work out well to move in with my in-laws, Frank and Olivia, in their duplex. I was surprised, though, to find Frank and Olivia to be really kind, which made me feel comfortable. Satisfied, I was glad to move forward with the wedding arrangements. However, the good times didn't last forever. Things with my in-laws appeared good at first, but Lily started to cause problems. I went to Jack's parents' house to talk about the specifics of the wedding and to register. "Jack, you've got yourself a pretty bride," said a visiting relative of Jack's at the time. Though I was flattered, I also observed Lily's icy gaze gazing at me. "Jack's lucky to have such a beauty," cheerfully replied Jack's father, Frank. However, upon a second glance, I believed I caught Lily scowling at Frank as well. I dismissed it at first, supposing I was merely hallucinating, and soon forgot about it. But something odd occurred the day of the wedding. Lily appeared in a white outfit. She was clearly not an ignorant student who didn't know the fundamentals of wedding etiquette. She was in her late 30s. She purposefully selected a color that contrasted with my wedding gown. Jack and my in-laws were astonished, of course, and questioned, "What were you thinking?" However, her response was only, "This was all I had." My in-laws claimed that Lily changed into the white dress on her way to the wedding, having left the house in a different colored garment. The act of secretly changing clothes in a sneaky manner can only be interpreted as malevolent. She even made a crude remark about my wedding dress, claiming that it looked more like a $250 cheap dress on Lauren, which made the situation worse. It must depend on who was dressed elegantly, I suppose. Then she simply turned to leave. I found it incomprehensible that she would do anything so damaging. Following the wedding ceremony the following day, Lily's demeanor drastically changed. She abruptly stopped me in the middle of my tasks and said, "Hey, don't wash my laundry with yours." I was merely attempting to assist Olivia, my mother-in-law, by taking up her housekeeping duties. However, Lily took offense that I had washed her clothes in addition to mine. "Washing my clothes with a plain Jane's clothes might make me plain too," the woman remarked. "Vile. Clean them one more." Then, before she left the room, she flung the laundry at me. You might think that I would have responded, but I was in such shock that I was at a loss for words. That's not how adults speak, is it? Sorting clothes by color to prevent plainness from spreading. Not from an adult lady, but rather from a teenage girl who is just beginning to gain independence. That's the kind of thing you'd expect. I pretended to rewash the garments but really just put them back in her closet to save trouble. Olivia even expressed her apology for Lily's actions and claimed it was all right. But Lily was unrelenting after that day. True, I only completed my greatest degree of education because I left school early to pursue a desire. However, I've never had a problem with it, and I don't feel bad about it. Experiencing trivialization due to my education was awful. Lily, however, received her degree from a nearby national college. She acts as though she is more elite than me despite the fact that it's not a prestigious university. In fact, she began to declare, "I'm an elite, unlike you." However, Lily wasn't always this way. I was at a loss as to what had caused her such distress. We held a get-together with family a few months following the wedding. They'd all met at the wedding, but here was a more laid-back gathering where they could talk to Jack and me. It was a bustling mood, and before long our wedding was discussed. One of the relatives said, "Jennifer's wedding dress was so cute." Definitely. Jack is fortunate to have a woman of her caliber. I'm eager to see what their children will look like, a second person said, obviously looking forward to our shared future. Not to boast, but I've always felt good about the way I look. Although Jack may not be very attractive, his balanced face and endearing aura help him become well-liked by others. I saw Lily becoming irritated as the family talked, engrossed in their own chatter and compliments. "You all might not know, but I was really popular in my school days," she blurted out of nowhere. That's when I finally understood. I knew what was really driving Lily crazy. Lily began boasting in front of the shocked looks on everyone else's faces about how popular she was at school and how guys would come flocking to her any time she went down the street. To be honest, that sounded ridiculous, especially in light of Lily. Lily isn't what you would consider conventionally gorgeous, to be honest. Her big round nose and small eyes made it difficult to accept the stories she was telling. With doubtful expressions on their faces, everyone listened for a while before losing interest and swiftly shifting the topic. Out of sympathy, I listened on, although it was difficult to pay attention when you could tell it was all made up. Later, Lily followed me into the kitchen to fetch beverages and abruptly grabbed my hair from behind. She growled, "What? You think you're better than me?" I was surprised and perplexed. I questioned, "What are you talking about?" "I understand that when I stated I was popular, you were simply making jokes. I'm able to tell," she yelled. For a second, I did not know what to say. She had begun to make the plainly false claim that she had 7 lovers at one point. I made a sincere effort to listen, but knowing anything is made up makes it difficult to remain engaged. "You really think that being considered lovely makes you so amazing, don't you?" She snarled, her hands tightening on my hair. "That's just because our country relatives aren't used to seeing women like you." I tried to remain calm and remarked, "Lily, I'm not feeling great about this." But she wasn't done. She screamed, "Shut up," and pulled my hair even more. "I'm the cutest person in this house. No, this neighborhood. Since I was little, people have told me that I'm cute. Don't let wearing makeup make you arrogant." Lily kept accusing me because she was never able to look beautiful, not even with makeup. "You're the cutest, Lily," I said, attempting to calm her down. "Observe? You're simply stating that," she retorted. "Throp pouts like you, with your fake concern, are so obvious." She gave me a shove that let go of my hair, and I landed hard on the ground. She remarked, "Don't get carried away just because you're called cute," and spat in my face, satisfied. "I'm so adorable," Lily exclaimed as she turned to leave. Naturally, Jack and my in-laws had to be informed about this situation. Everyone's look changed to not again when I told them the story. I discovered that Lily, like how she behaved at the family get-together, is a narcissist with an exaggerated sense of self-worth. Her late grandfather, who lavished affection on her as his only grandchild, turns out to be the source of this behavior. His constant insistence that she was more attractive than TV celebrities seems to have warped her sense of beauty. She seems to think she's the pinnacle of cuteness as a result. When she was younger, this led to problems and confrontations with her peers. All of them expressed regret for the trouble they had caused me, but they were unable to help. Jack and the in-laws say Lily doesn't seem to listen to anyone. I understood, but it was frustrating to hear that nothing could be done, especially when Lily's behavior wasn't just verbally abusive, but also physically harmful. I thought to myself they should do something about it. I even started considering divorce so soon after getting married. But then, within just 2 weeks, Lily brought home a man, introducing him as her fiancé. We were all surprised, as none of us had even heard that she was dating anyone. Her fiancé, Eric, was a serious-looking man with glasses who seemed timid and kept his head down. Lily, on the other hand, was acting tough and domineering. There was no sign of affection or intimacy between them, making me wonder if he was really okay with marrying Lily. While I was preparing coffee in the kitchen, lost in thought about the situation, Lily started berating me again. "Hey, housekeeper, hurry up with the coffee." This is what happens when dropouts who are unattractive try to do a simple task. Don't keep my fiancé waiting. If this engagement gets called off, it's your fault, she snapped. Jack and the in-laws tried to calm her down, telling her that enough was enough, but she wouldn't listen. Just as I was about to respond, Eric looked up at me. His gaze was so intense that it caught me off guard. I was speechless and asked, "What? Why are you looking at me like that?" Then suddenly he exclaimed, "Sandra," and hugged me tightly. Lily, taken aback, let out a confused "huh." Everyone in the room was shocked. Eric continued, "You've been doing well. I was worried about you after you retired. There's no information about you online." I was flustered and mumbled, well. Eric quickly let go, realizing my discomfort. Lily, still confused, asked, "What's going on? Are you a fan of my marriage?" Eric, now more confident, proudly responded, "Yes, I'm a fan of Sandra." He seemed so different from the timid person we had seen earlier. Olivia, puzzled, asked, "Sandra? Who's that?" Jack then explained, "It's the idol group Lauren used to be part of." I nodded silently, unsure of how to respond. Amy Maria, later known as Amy and Maria, was the musical group I was part of during my teenage years. I moved to the city at 17 and performed under the stage name Pew until I was 20. While Amy Maria wasn't world famous, we had our share of popularity. Unfortunately, the group disbanded because of some members' misconduct, and I left the music industry when I was 21. I had been a lead member and the group's leader, and it was because of this that I dropped out of school. I chose to follow my dream, working part-time jobs to support myself, and I've never regretted that decision. Back when I was a teenager and later decided to marry Jack, I was working at an apparel shop. I had never mentioned my past as a musician to my in-laws or to Lily. The topic just never came up, and I felt it wasn't relevant to my current life. "Wow, you were a musician. That's amazing. Why didn't you tell us?" Olivia exclaimed, thrilled to learn something new about me. "I had some fame, but it wasn't enough to appear on TV," I explained, feeling a bit embarrassed about it. I didn't really think it was worth mentioning. Now being reminded of that part of my life in front of everyone, I felt a mix of emotions: pride, nostalgia, and a bit of embarrassment. Eric, still glaring at Lily, said, "Lily, you just said some harsh words to Sandra, didn't you?" Lily stumbled over her words, clearly taken aback by the sudden attention. "Oh well, she muttered, not sure how to respond. Eric didn't let up. "How could you say such things to Sandra? What right do you have to act all high and mighty?" He snapped. "You ugly girl." Suddenly, Eric's anger flared, and he yelled at Lily, leaving everyone in the room stunned. "What? These two are engaged," someone whispered in disbelief. I quickly intervened, trying to calm the situation down. "Eric, calm down. I'm not bothered by it. Don't be so harsh on her," I said, turning to him. But Eric wasn't ready to let it go. "No, Sandra, you're wrong." Eric raised his voice, his frustration clear. "She only approached me because I'm a doctor. She said she would marry anyone if it meant bragging to her sister-in-law." "That's not true, Eric," I said quietly, trying to de-escalate the situation. But Eric wasn't done. "A girl who proposes just after 3 weeks of dating means nothing to me," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. We were all dumbstruck by the unfolding drama. Apparently, Lily had planned to marry a high-status man just to boast to me. She had informed others that her degree had allowed her to marry a doctor. Lally had made a lot of connections before our wedding by going to any dinner parties and pursuing any man who seemed like a suitable fit. Naturally, finding such a great match wasn't simple. She had first casually admitted to attractive guys or people in powerful corporate positions, but all she met was failure. Lily met Dr. Eric a few weeks later. Lily turned her attention to Eric since she didn't want to pass up the opportunity to be with someone who was well paid. Having never been in a relationship before, Eric thought to himself, "No one has ever pursued me so passionately." However, a week later, he heard Lily talking on the phone and understood the hard reality. She was only interested in marrying a doctor and wasn't really in love with him. Eric accepted her proposal in spite of this knowledge, thinking that perhaps in time, Lily might come to love him. Eric only wanted to grab the chance, and Lily, who was willing to settle for anyone, seemed strangely matched. However, I remained silent, since I believed that no one should weed a girl who denigrates other people. Lally was obviously scared by Eric's sudden fury, but Eric was beyond angry. Eric, who is usually rather calm, was furious, which caught everyone off guard. Whispering, Lily said, "What's so good about that dropout? That unattractive chick. You call Sandra ugly? How can you? It's you who doesn't have enough class." Eric shot back, growing more enraged. I chose to intervene, speaking quietly yet firmly. "Lily, you bring up my status as a dropout so much. Is it truly that awful?" I questioned, seeing as Eric's face became stern. "Of course it's bad without education," Lily shot back, trying, but failing, to sound assured. "But isn't the proprietor of your favorite eatery, who began chef training immediately following high school, also bad? What about your favorite actor that dropped out as well? Is it their fault that they didn't finish school?" I pressed the question. "That's different. They're in special professions." Lily stumbled as she attempted to support her claim. "Well, I too decided to skip out in order to pursue a unique profession as a musician. Does success mean it counts exclusively for me?" My gaze met hers as I posed a challenge. "I was genuinely surprised to learn that you were a musician," Lily mumbled. "Yeah, but even if you did know, you would have found another reason to insult me, wouldn't you?" I said, surprising Lily by surprise. She looked away, reluctant to look me in the eye. "Since you brought up education, let's talk about it. I don't like to brag about it," I said. "You may boast about Princeton, but anyone can apply to any of your national institutions just by writing their name. Not to mention that you attended the state's lowest performing high school upon graduating. Do you simply take pride in your ability to write your name? Isn't that a little meaningless?" I grinned and replied, observing Lily's face flushed with shame. "Shut up," Lily growled, but she didn't sound very serious. "Wow, Lily, you're able to write your name. Do you feel satisfied now? Do you wish to belittle me? Lily, go on. You're quite talented." I clapped for her, saying mockingly. Eric chimed in, saying, "Aw, why had I overlooked Sandra? Fans are amazing for such an ugly girl." Even now, standing next to an adoring Eric, even though I didn't think I looked all that cute, Lily's demeanor fell apart. "This is the worst," she muttered, looking distraught. "I've never experienced such ridicule. I'm adorable. You realize that it's your fault. Furthermore, your personality isn't adorable either. It's not just about appearances." "I know I'm not the cutest either," I said, "but I'm not as bad as you. Perhaps begin by addressing your unpleasant personality." "What?" Who believe you to be? Anger twisted Lily's face. You see, a woman's face ages with time, I said quietly. It makes no sense to exaggerate how good you appear. The heart matters most because inner beauty radiates from the face. Olivia nodded and gave a clap of approval. You said it quite well, she said. Jack laughed and said, True, I used to like cute girls when I was younger, but when I started thinking about marriage, I began to value comfort and personality more. My father-in-law, Frank said sarcastically, Lily, you won't find happiness in marriage with your current attitude. People used to call you cute, but it was as a grandchild, not as attractive to the outside world. If you have a negative personality, you'll become unattractive on the inside as well. Feeling the weight of everyone's remarks, Lily let out a heavy sigh. She said, This is just the worst, and broke down in tears. Even though my fiancé is crying, I can't help but think that a girl with a bad personality has an ugly crying face, Eric stated, displaying no pity. Let's end this relationship. I'm sure I'll get sucked into something like this. Sandra, I apologize for being sidetracked by her. And with that, Lily's engagement came to an abrupt stop. Everyone told her she needed to grow up and work on herself, so she was tossed out of the house. Lily was stubborn at first. She said, I have friends. I won't let being kicked out bother me. But she was defeated when she got home after 5 days. I got ejected from my friend after a fight. With a desperate tone, she questioned, Is it possible for me to return? Despite spending a lot of time together, Lily's buddy seems to have recognized her shortcomings and was unwilling to take her in. Naturally, neither Jack nor my in-laws gave her back. They expressed regret to me for not acting sooner and that they had been spoiling Lily too much over the years. We were aware of what was going on, but we did nothing. We apologize, they said. I comprehend, I answered. It's difficult for parents to send their child away, but she's already 21. She must accept responsibility for her conduct as an adult. Then Jack said that he had been plotting in private to provide Lily a separate home to live in apart from me. But before he could execute his strategy, Lily had already been expelled. He told me he was sorry he had made me go through that. If a husband doesn't do a better job of protecting his wife, I should get a divorce. I replied with a smile and a jest, I guess you're safe this time. After that, Lily moved into an apartment of her own, but she didn't have an easy life. She had a sprained ankle after falling off her bike, was robbed, had men she met on a dating app ask for money, and even discovered that all of her oranges in her refrigerator had gone bad. Her previous transgressions appeared to be coming back to haunt her. Well, I hope she has luck. I'm too busy these days raising our young girl to give it much thought. She's maturing so quickly. It seems like yesterday was yesterday. She had been crawling, but now she was taking independent walks. She even recently told me, grinning broadly, Mommy, I have a boyfriend. The boy is one of her kindergarten classmates. After playing house, they got to know one another and even made a small vow to marry each other someday. It's quite sweet and naive. Jack Mox sobbed while drinking his drink and said, Don't leave, Dad, and get married, after learning about it. Naturally, we are both aware that their partnership is really a kid's game, similar to playing house. It also serves as a reminder of how fast children grow up. When the time comes, we will be there to support our little girl when she finds the person she truly wants to marry. Jack and I are devoted to helping her become the best version of herself up to that point. We wish to support her in growing into an even more amazing young lady, because she is our pride and delight. However, the journey to becoming a lady is still far from over, full with exciting new experiences and educational moments. And speaking of which, it's time for a quick talk and some cleaning up, because she just left a huge mess in the living room. She faces fresh obstacles and delights every day, and I can't wait to watch who she develops into. When I opened the freezer at -4 degrees F, I cried out. There was my daughter, 6 months old, that I had given to my husband. I quickly scooped her up and touched her cheek. She seemed chilly, and I could not hear her son. I fell down right then and there. Why is it now at this point? When I called my husband, he casually said our daughter was still doing okay. Lies. I made the decision to look into the man who had duped me and let our child suffer from this. What I found was unbelievable. I was so angry that I was determined to make my spouse suffer. Olivia is my name. I was a client and a restaurant owner when I met my husband, Michael, who is 5 years older than me. One of my regular hangouts with coworkers was the restaurant next to the publishing business where I work. Michael was constantly working hard in the restaurant, and I found myself appreciating that. We were reunited by fate, and our romance took off. When I was 34, we tied the knot and began our new life together in the restaurant's upstairs apartment. Not long after I moved in, I found out I was expecting. The look of excitement on Michael's face was priceless. Olivia, is that accurate? You succeeded. I will at last become a father. We shared ultrasound pictures from every checkup, looking forward to the day we would finally meet our child. I gave birth to our daughter, Mia, at the last minute after working virtually nonstop. We had a wonderful husband and a cute child, and even with the difficulties of being first-time parents, our lives was full of happiness. Since the birth of our child, Michael's work schedule has expanded, and during my maternity leave, I have handled the majority of household tasks and childcare. Though I knew there was nothing I could do about it, I was concerned for his welfare. Aren't you getting enough sleep? I inquired. In reply, he said, well, I'm managing somehow. At least he didn't have to commute. Our house was on the first floor of the eatery. He would leave every day for meetings, returning late at night, as there were plans for a new shop during this time. After closing his own business, he also went to other restaurants with staff members to brainstorm new menu items. He'd sleep until the very last minute before getting ready, so mornings were a blur. Unfortunately, he didn't have much time for Maya because of his hectic schedule. Hey, would you accompany me tomorrow on your day off to buy some children's clothes? No way. I'm worn out. On the day the store closes, is it not possible for me to sleep? My spouse appeared to be depressed due to his work-related exhaustion. He cried, enough, as our daughter fussed awake in the middle of the night, put an end to her wailing. In addition, he flung nearby things at us out of fury. Maya is still a baby. It can't be helped. I attempted to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. After a while, he said, enough already. I'll spend the night at the store. He stormed out of the house after saying those things. I kept telling myself maybe Michael wouldn't feel the same way until circumstances with the new shop calmed down. Nevertheless, nothing appeared to have changed by the time our baby became 3 months old. My closest friend wanted me to attend her wedding, which was taking place in 3 months at a resort in the United States, according to a message I received at that time. I told her it to be challenging, but she persisted and even asked me to give a speech. I reasoned that it would be impossible to leave Mia with Michael. It would be a problem for my folks to travel here, because they lived far away. Michael's aging parents were nearby, but I was hesitant to ask them to look after our infant. I'd love to see the bride and celebrate. I sighed as I looked at the invitation. Just then, my husband approached, glancing at what was in my hands. "A friend's wedding?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied. "It's in 3 months, but with Mia, I'm considering declining." "Go ahead and attend," he said. I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" I asked. He replied, "The wedding. Since I'll take a break from the shop and take care of Mia, you should go." His unexpected suggestion left me speechless, and I couldn't respond immediately. "Are you sure?" Even though it's a resort location within the U.S., it's quite far, and if something happens, I won't be able to return quickly because of the flight. I expressed my concerns, but he reassured me. "It's okay. Take a break once in a while." Thank you. I had honest concerns about my husband, who hadn't been involved in taking care of our daughter much since she was born. Could he handle it alone for several days? However, I didn't want to dampen his enthusiasm, so I swallowed my words and asked him to do it. Over the next 3 months, I carefully taught Michael how to take care of Mia, considering his schedule. On the day I departed for my friend's wedding, I said, "Take care." Yeah. Leave it to me. Have a great time." I entrusted our daughter to him and left home as planned. However, upon arriving at the airport, an announcement informed me that the flight was canceled due to sudden bad weather. I contacted my friend to apologize for the last-minute cancellation. As I tried to call Michael to explain, there was no answer. Is he struggling with taking care of Mia? I wondered. Imagining that scene made me feel somewhat amused. I decided not to bother sending an email, assuming he wouldn't have time to read it, and returned home. When I arrived home, drenched in the sideways rain, neither my husband nor our daughter was in the living room or the bedroom. Yet, considering the stormy weather, it seemed unlikely they had gone out since it was the shop's scheduled day off. I ventured downstairs just to be sure. The atmosphere there was eerily quiet, and I couldn't sense anyone's presence. However, the light in the pantry, where he kept the freezer and other supplies, was on. Did someone forget to turn it off? As I stepped into the room, I noticed that the freezer door was slightly ajar, allowing cold air to escape. Concerned about the perishable items inside, I decided to check. When I opened the door, I screamed. I was met with a chilling sight. Our 6-month-old daughter, Mia, placed in a basket and stored in the freezer at a bone-chilling -4 degrees F. I immediately pulled her out and held her close. Mia, stay with me." Her face was icy, and she made no sound. Despair washed over me as I cradled her, but I knew I had to act quickly. I called an ambulance, and as they rushed me out to the emergency room, I silently prayed for her safety. Why did this happen? Where on earth is Michael? I called my husband repeatedly, but each time it went straight to voicemail without connecting. Frustrated, I decided to test the waters by sending him an email, intentionally asking about our daughter's well-being. To my surprise, I received a message saying, "Maya is happily playing. Enjoy the wedding." Yet at that very moment, our daughter was still receiving medical treatment behind that door. Liar. The rage I felt toward Michael was boiling inside me. It was then that I resolved to seek thorough revenge against him and took action. 3 days later, my husband returned home. Instead of heading for our house, he went straight to the shop. I watched his actions through the baby monitor camera I had installed in the shop from our upstairs residence. Without hesitation, He walked toward the room where the freezer was located. Through the camera, he seemed somewhat frantic. "Whoa!" His scream echoed all the way to the second floor. I quietly followed him downstairs and stood behind him. He muttered something almost like a chant. "Why are you shouting so loudly? I can hear you all the way upstairs." Startled, he turned around when he noticed my presence. "Ha! Why?" he stammered. Maya would be frightened. Was she behaving well? I asked, noticing our daughter's clothes behind him. As I leaned in to see Mia's face, Michael used his entire body to block me. "I want to hold her quickly, so could you move aside?" he stammered. "No, she's sleeping now. It's better to leave her alone." But I couldn't wait, even just for her sleeping face. "Ah!" I screamed, and Michael awkwardly averted his eyes. "What's going on? Where's Maya?" I demanded. He hesitated. "Well, you see, it was no wonder the bass in the freezer should have contained our daughter, but instead, there was a baby doll dressed in Mia's clothes. Of course, it was all my doing, a carefully orchestrated performance. Please bear with this exchange a little longer. This was just her plaything." "Really? So where's Maya?" She's being looked after." "Yes, she's temporarily with someone else." Michael piled on the lies, desperately trying to salvage the situation. Then he looked at me, realization dawning on his face. "Why are you here? Wasn't your return scheduled for the evening? If I returned home early, would it cause any problems?" "No, it's not like that. In reality, when I decided to take revenge on Michael, I had sent him an email. It stated that I would continue entrusting our daughter to him and that I would return home 3 days later in the evening. That email was a lie. On that day, the flight was canceled due to bad weather, so I couldn't go. That's why I immediately returned home." "Huh? I didn't hear anything about that. Why didn't you contact me sooner?" "But it wasn't you who didn't answer. Even so, I also miss calls sometimes." Michael, who had been assertive until then, grew increasingly timid. Toward the end, he mumbled so softly that I could barely hear him. However, whether he answered the phone at that moment no longer mattered. My anger wasn't about such trivial matters. Claiming that you left Mia with someone else was a lie, right? After all, when I returned home, you weren't here, and our daughter was in the freezer. Did you know? And yet you even used such a doll to play a disgusting prank." Michael retorted, growing defensive as he approached me, but I stood my ground. "Who's the real lowest of the low? When I asked you about Maya's well-being in that email, you said she was happily playing." Michael's face twisted in frustration, and yet at that moment, she was already at the hospital. "You liar. What were you doing?" Tears welled up as I confronted him, but he avoided eye contact, turning away in silence. "Say something," I declared, thrusting a piece of paper in front of my husband's nose. "Huh. You were out here, weren't you?" The paper was a schedule for a trip. "Well, it's because we suddenly had a meeting for the new shop at the hotel. Again. But the reservation was made 3 months ago, right after I decided to attend my friend's wedding. As I checked the date, it aligned with the moment I committed to the wedding." Michael seemed to panic again, avoiding eye contact and falling silent. "Moreover, you reserved a couple's plan at the hotel." "Huh. I wasn't invited. It was something I saw on TV, a popular option. I thought it might benefit our shop, so I went for research." His feeble excuses only increased my suspicion. A faint sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. "Well, So you took your employees along? Yeah, like a company trip. I inwardly sighed at Michael's ever-changing explanations, but now it was showtime. I couldn't afford to drag out this exchange any longer. What part of this is a business trip? I confronted him, presenting several photos. They showed my husband posing happily with another woman at tourist spots and getting cozy in bathrobes at the hotel. Clearly, it wasn't a work-related trip. They looked like a couple on vacation. Michael pulled out his phone, glancing between the photos I'd handed him and his screen, looking flustered. How did you get these pictures? He demanded, showing me his phone. To his surprise, the same images I printed were displayed there. I smirked at him. Did you forget that your phone's contents are accessible from a computer? Michael's face fell as he remembered. You see, he'd previously helped create greeting cards for a customer using his phone data, including addresses. He'd linked his phone and computer, allowing me to access reservation details and even the photos sent by his affair partner from the tourist spots. Moreover, isn't she one of your employees? No wonder you confidently called it a company trip. Michael's affair partner was indeed a 28-year-old woman named Sophia who worked at his restaurant. To think I was being cheated on right under my nose. Honestly, it's quite shocking. It's hard to see what is under your nose. Michael tried to deflect with a joke, but there was no sign of remorse. I had no lingering feelings for a man like him. I can't forgive what you did to Mia, more than your infidelity, I declared. Well, if you've already found out, there's no helping it, Michael retorted, wearing a defiant smile. I wanted to be with Sophia, and I planned to divorce you. As for child support, well, that's another matter. Paying for Maya is a bit much. He seemed reluctant to spend unnecessarily on child support. That's when he saw me agonizing over attending my friend's wedding. Michael had an idea. If he got rid of the daughter, all problems would vanish. So that day, he locked Mia in the freezer and set off confidently on his affair trip. His plan was to handle it before I returned home and find a clever excuse for her death. Well, it's all ruined because of you. I felt nothing but disgust as he grinned. So where's Maya? When's the funeral? What are you talking about? I'm asking about her. What happened to her? Michael's frustration was evident in his tone. Maya is fine right now. My mom is with her at the hospital. What? Is she alive? He looked visibly disappointed. I had discovered Mia shortly after Michael left the house. Her face was cold, and she wasn't crying. I had braced myself for the worst, but while waiting for the ambulance, Mia opened her eyes, yawned, and cried loudly. It seemed she had slept soundly even in that situation. The hospital conducted thorough tests, but there were no abnormalities. Considering her young age, just 6 months, they decided on a slightly longer hospital stay. The freezer had been slightly ajar, and I found her soon after Michael's departure. Mia's survival was a combination of luck, her age, the short time she was inside, and the fortunate circumstances. While I can say this now that she's safe, I'm still amazed by Mia's resilience, how she could sleep soundly anywhere undisturbed. I'll report this incident to the police, I declared. Huh? Why? She's safe now, so what's the problem? Upon hearing the word police, his eyes widened, and he looked flustered. That's not the issue. What you did could have cost our child's life. If things had gone wrong, damn it, why didn't the plane fly? If you had attended the wedding, my plan would have been foolproof. He defiantly paced around me, spitting as he spoke. It seemed he lacked any awareness of his wrongdoing. To make him acknowledge his guilt, I planned to involve the police and seek severe consequences. But first, I had another way to teach him a lesson regarding this matter. I'll have it written up in the magazine. The reputation of this shop will take a nosedive. Wait a minute. That's unfair. It's an abuse of authority. Michael stopped in his tracks and grabbed my shoulder, but I shook off his hand with all my strength. All I'm doing is my job. I used to work for a publishing company that was in charge of the magazine department. Perhaps you forgot. I used to go to my husband's restaurant, which was excellent, but not very well known, before we were married. As a result, I included it in an article for the E-Reporter's Hidden Gem Restaurants area, and it soon flourished. That's how I gained Michael's appreciation and finally started dating and got married to him. My spouse is quite nervous because he is aware of the consequences of being published in a magazine. I even have plans for a new branch, but I've come this far. Our sales are going to be horribly affected by a review like that, and I will be completely untrustworthy. Our way of life will suffer if that occurs, but I'm not aware of it. Mia, and you will be just as impacted, won't you? He kept trying to convince me, pleading with me. Hold on. I take it that you wanted to be with your partner in the affair and were intending to file for divorce from me. Then, it makes no difference what occurs to us. That, well, is the circumstances. Thus, the documentation is ready. Sign it right now. In addition, I'll be requesting child support and alimony. I waved the divorce decree in my spouse's face. He grabbed them from me and fixed his intense gaze on them. At last acknowledging the truth, Michael abruptly started apologizing. I apologize. Please pardon me. Please keep this from the police. And I want you to think again about getting a divorce. He was so pathetic that even as he cried out in desperation, I couldn't help but think of my husband. We don't need the cops if an apology suffices. Live with your regrets and move on. I pulled him away with a forceful tone, and Michael fell to the ground sobbing. After that, my spouse and I formalized our divorce. I asked that he and his lover pay me a total of $20,000 for his affair. We also decided that he would pay our daughter's child support in full, at an amount of $63,000. My husband set up this incident out of fear of needless spending, knowing full well the severe repercussions he would face. Michael was questioned and the police were notified. He was then taken into custody and given a jail sentence. This episode was widely publicized in publications and made headlines in the news, even without my publishing an article. In addition, our daughter's freezer keeping experience sparked a barrage of negative comments on social media, where I had posted details about the restaurant. The restaurant closed down quickly as a result of its sharp decline in reputation. My spouse had to pay for his acts because he had nowhere to go back to. Conversely, I began a new life with my kid. Michael had never had any parental responsibilities. Thus, his absence had no effect. Mia is having a happy childhood, and I'm going to keep trying to make her smile. How did you come upon this tale? Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. Till then, enjoy our upcoming video.